Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Chris Petrone, and I want to do a YouTube video here about septoplasties and turbinate reduction. This is going to be pretty much just a one-taker, and it's something that I feel really, really passionately about. Now, some of you might know my other video where I talked about septoplasties and turbinate reductions. This one's going to be a lot briefer, more brief. That one was 30 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep this under 10. If you're watching this, odds are that you are considering getting a septoplasty, turbinate reduction, maybe another nose surgery like a rhinoplasty, whatever. Okay, so the things that I want to get across are that septoplasties and turbinate reduction, that's a surgery, obviously. Surgery is, in my opinion, should be a last resort, always. You might have a really jacked up septum, completely just blocking one of the sides of your nose, that type of thing. Okay, you probably need surgery for that. I get it. But if you were having, I was having breathing difficulties, right? And one thing I experienced was my nostrils kind of sucking in while I slept, especially if I was laying on my side. Because of gravity, my right nostril would then kind of come down. I don't know if it's flipped, but this is my right side. And it would come down and sort of suck in and cut off some of the airflow to my nose. And so I was like, okay, I need some help. I Googled it. Nasal valve collapse comes up. I'm like, okay, cool. Oh, Aller batten grafts, spreader grafts. Okay, there are things that can help me. Cool. And nose strips helped me a lot. At the time, I was living in a house where the owner previously owned a dog. Now, I don't know if that was the specific allergen that made my turbinates swell up a lot, or if it was something else, or if I was just overthinking it. But for whatever reason, that whole year, I had trouble breathing, aside from my nasal valve collapse. I would wear a nose strip to sleep, and I would still feel really stuffed up. Okay, so I went to a doctor, and this is over in the Jacksonville area when I was living there at the time. And they took a look at my nose, and I'm like, look, my nose like sucks in, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh yeah, oh man, yeah, your turbinates are big. Oh, your septum's deviated. All right, here, try this nasal spray, try this. And they did that to leave sort of like a paper trail for the insurance companies saying, we tried this spray, we tried this pill, we tried this whatever. Okay, cool. But I finally went back and I was like, all right, let's do this. And they recommended septoplasty and turbinate reduction, even though my chief complaint was nasal valve collapse. So that's number one yellow flag right there that they're trying to direct me to a different surgery when I know what the issue is structurally. Like I feel it, I can see it. I could see my nostrils sucking in, and they're like, no, your turbinates are enlarged. And they were, I believe that. It'll help you breathe a lot more if we open up that airway. It didn't. I still have the nasal valve collapse, although maybe it's not quite as bad now. But anyway, point is, they didn't address the issue outright. And I was okay with that because I'm like, well, I know my septum's deviated a little bit at least. So, okay, yeah, let's do this. What's the harm? And then if I still need something else done in the future, fine, I'll do that. Okay. The problem is, I thought that submucosal resection, which is a type of turbinate reduction, can't end up in with empty nose syndrome because it's one of the newer methods. And that's what a lot of ENTs will tell you. Whether it's because of their own ignorance or because they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes, they'll say, oh, no, these newer methods like radiofrequency ablation or submucosal resection can't cause empty nose syndrome. They absolutely can. It's a fact. There are several studies now that will back that up. Long story short, 7 to 8 weeks post-op, I started experiencing empty nose syndrome-like symptoms, including a sense of suffocation, my nose feeling too open, feeling cold when I would inhale, stuff like that. It was really terrible. I had panic attacks, elevated heart rate. It was miserable. I mean, I was like a shell of a human being for 2.5 months. Really, really bad. I flew out to Houston to see a doctor. I actually still have an appointment with Dr. Nyack out in California in March, but I'm probably not going to go to that because I feel significantly better now. My case got better by waiting. So most people will tell you that that is not empty nose syndrome. That's not full-on diagnosed. You have empty nose syndrome. I just felt some of those symptoms, but they went away in the natural healing period. Fine. Point is, I went in the Facebook pages and I was reading up on empty nose syndrome, and I saw so many people who self-unalived. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, but that's terrifying. And I also spoke with many people whose lives were completely ruined, or just ruined compared to what they previously were, all from a simple turbinate reduction surgery. Submucosal resection, radiofrequency ablation, out fracture. The more I researched, the more I realized you can get empty nose syndrome from any form of turbinate reduction, period. Any form. It's less likely with submucosal resection, out fracture, radiofrequency ablation, yeah. but it's still possible and not nearly as rare as ENTs would like you to believe. What I want to make abundantly clear here, and I'm going to try to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes or so, maybe 3, is that ENT doctors and other doctors in related fields like rhinologists and whatnot who do these surgeries, by and large, will not tell you how common it is to get empty nose syndrome symptoms, whether you have full-blown empty nose syndrome or not. Now, it's a syndrome, which means not everyone experiences the symptoms in the same way or all the same symptoms. You know, like if you have a heart attack, you have a heart attack. But empty nose syndrome, you know, Google the definition of a syndrome. I don't have it in front of me right now, but one of the key things about that is that it's different for different people, the way they experience it and the way it manifests for them. It's sort of an umbrella catch-all term. Really, what we should be looking at is people who have breathing issues and complications post-turbinate reduction, not just people who would fit in the empty nose syndrome umbrella and parameters, because that pool of people is huge. Now, I don't know the numbers on that. Maybe most people who get turbinate reductions are happy and satisfied, maybe. But I have a strong feeling that a much larger number than we are currently representing and recognizing have significant issues, whether they really fully know it or not. And for example, I had these severe issues that put me in a horrible, horrible place mentally and physically, but there's no record of that. I messaged my doctor about it, but I'm not going to appear in any study as a statistic. It's just going to get swept under the rug. And they replied back to me and they're like, yeah, we don't know what to tell you, man. Most people love the outcome of their surgery. Try nasal saline. Like, they don't give a shit. They want you in and out the door. They want their money. Here's the truth. Any form, and I'm going to end with this, any form of turbinate reduction surgery carries a risk of empty nose syndrome. They might tell you it's 0.1%, but it's super under-recognized and super under-reported. So I know that the number is higher than that. It has to be. It has to be. Some doctors, ENTs, I met one, will say that they don't even really believe that empty nose syndrome exists. They'll use language either outright, like it doesn't exist, or they'll say something like, well, you know, if it even exists. And they're very passive about it. We have the studies to back it up now, that it is a scientific fact that A, empty nose syndrome exists, B, lots of people kill themselves because of it, and C, you can get empty nose syndrome from any turbinate reduction method, including one of the most conservative methods, which is outfracture, because they don't actually remove anything. They just sort of lateralize it. So if you're an ENT and you're not telling potential patients for a turbinate reduction that this is a risk, you're either A, just ignorant of the facts and you don't know, in which case, like, you shouldn't be in that profession, you know? Or B, you're withholding that information because you know that if you told people, that would significantly reduce the amount of people who want the surgery, which would result in less money in your pocket, which in my eyes is malicious and wrong. What you'll come to find is that the informed consent that you'll receive from your doctor as a patient is so rarely properly informed. I know it never came up in the process of my appointments. This is something that we need to discuss and talk about a lot more. And I have a feeling that as the years go on, we're going to see people continue to take their own lives because of complications from nasal turbinate reduction. I don't think it should be done in the vast majority of the cases. I'm not saying it should be completely illegal or never ever done, but I think it's something that ENTs just lump in with septoplasties without even telling the patient, or rhinoplasties without even telling the patient, because they just think, yeah, it's a good thing to do. And it's really a lot more complicated than people would like to admit, especially the so-called experts who are doing these operations. Last thing I want to say is Dr. Nayak in Stanford, California, is one of the most highly regarded ENTs in the United States, potentially even the world. And he's one of the largest, I guess, he's the guy in the US for empty nose syndrome related surgeries and treatment. He was on a podcast this year, maybe March of this year, 2024, and he said, we don't know why people get empty nose syndrome. I can do, for example, you can cut a certain valve in a heart for 1,000 people, and all 1,000 of those people will have the same exact biological reaction. You can operate and do a turbinate reduction the same exact way, the same exact method on 1,000 people, and you'll end up with a few people who get empty nose syndrome, and we do not know why. We do not know why some people get it and some people don't. He is one of the best surgeons who would do a turbinate reduction on you, and I'm using rough numbers, but I'm paraphrasing his own quote here. He performed turbinate reductions on about 3,000 turbinates. That's about 1,500 patients, because 2 turbinates per patient, probably all of those times, maybe not all of them, but almost all of them. And out of those 3,000 turbinates that he operated on, 3 of those turbinates resulted in empty nose syndrome. Now for him, that was unilaterally in all 3 cases, meaning one-sided. So 3 people out of 1,500 ended up with one-sided empty nose syndrome that we know about from his patients. Now, the fact that he's very aware of empty nose syndrome and is willing to talk about it like that leads me to believe that he's probably not lying about that number. It's not like there are, actually 15 people that he operated on, but he's only telling us about 3. But that would lead me to believe that he only knows about 3 of them. Maybe other people are, again, remember I said it's highly under-recognized. There are a lot of people who are suffering complications of turbinate reduction, maybe that don't even fit under the umbrella of empty nose syndrome, but they don't really know it, and they don't know that their turbinate reduction was the cause of it, because these things can happen years later. Empty nose syndrome can come 3 years later, 4 years later, 5 years, it doesn't have to be immediate, although it can be. So here's my question to you. If Dr. Nyack, one of the best at doing this, gave 3 patients out of 1,500 empty nose syndrome, again, one-sided, but still, that's a rate of 1 in 500, which is what, 0.2%? And knowing that the majority of people who get empty nose syndrome end up killing themselves, would you want to take a 1 in 500 chance that that's going to be your fate for this surgery? And maybe you would. Maybe you would. And maybe that should be up to you. I don't know. I'm not going to start to say like what should or should not be the law. But I don't think any doctor would put the terms that bluntly to you pre-surgery, because too many people would say no, they don't want the surgery. And again, that would hurt their pockets. And the second question to kind of follow up with that is, that's Dr. Nyack. Are you going to tell me, for the majority of you, that the doctor performing the turbinate reduction on you is as good as Dr. Nyack? Probably not. It's unlikely. So what's the rate for the doctor that you're about to go see? 1 in 300? 1 in 400? 1 in 200? 1 in 100? Something to think about. If I said I'm going to roll a 1 in 300, probability right now, and 299 out of those times, 150 of those times your breathing's going to be better. 100 of those times your breathing's going to be kind of the same, but you're going to have other issues. 49 of those times you're going to have some issues that you actually kind of regret the surgery, and then 1 of those times you're going to want to kill yourself. I don't think you do it, man, because it's not like, 1 in 300, so it's a 1% chance I want to kill myself, and a 299% chance I have superhuman breathing. No, that's not how that works. Tons of people have complications of these surgeries that never get talked about. Something to consider. Surgery should be a last resort, always, always. Go in the Empty Nose Syndrome Facebook group or the subreddit, talk to these people. It's not talked about enough, man, and it needs to be. So I would avoid turbinate reduction at all costs. And if you need a septoplasty, there seems to be a very, very, very low incidence of empty nose syndrome with septoplasty, if any at all. I think a septoplasty is something that you can totally consider. Those are not a walk in the park either, and some people have complications from them. So make sure you do your research, get a good doctor, and stuff like that. But maybe get some written commitment that your doctor won't operate on the turbinates and just stick to the septoplasty alone. Oh, and other things, turbinates don't grow back. That's not a thing. They can swell, they can re-swell, so you get the surgery and then they kind of swell up again. But if you remove the bone, that bone's not coming back. If you remove that inner, it's like a penis. If I cut off 2 inches from your penis and then it healed over, it can still swell and contract and swell and contract, but I still took that off. The tissue that I removed is not going to come back. So I hope that makes sense. Doctors will tell you that your turbinates, they sometimes grow back. It's more language to downplay what's actually going on. So please, please, please stop being so trusting of doctors. And I think the older you get, the more you realize that there's a lot of fucking assholes out there, man. And people want to take advantage of other people and play it off. And empty nose syndrome is one of those things that because it's so often delayed, they get to just be like, ah, well, it's something else. So take your life in your own hands, make good choices, and please spread awareness of this horrible, fucked up thing. All right, guys. Love you. Stay safe.